Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Leatherheads, starring George Clooney, Renee Zellweger, and John Krasinski, directed by George Clooney. Now, I remember seeing this I don't know when it came out, but like 2007 or 8, I forget what year this was. And I saw it in the theater a long time ago. It's been so long that I don't remember my opinion about this movie. So let's see if it's any good or any better since it's been too many years since I've seen this. Let's get into it. The movie opens in the year 1925 with a college football player named Carter Rutherford, played by John Krasinski, planning on retiring from playing football after graduating college. And one reporter thinks about him going pro, while we get pro football players Dodge Connolly, played by the movie's director George Clooney, playing some pro football as a kid steals the only ball they have to play the game, and the coach Frank Ferguson is upset about it as they have no choice but to forfeit the game and beat the red team's asses because their team is blue. And this opener is fine, and the movie is not as good as Good Night and Good Luck and Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, as this is a more of a sports comedy set back in the day. A Chicago reporter, Lexi Littleton, played by Renee Zellweger, meeting with her boss Harvey, giving her an assignment about a war hero football player Carter Rutherford. As she reluctantly agrees, and I do like Renee Zellweger, as back in the day I only knew her before Bridget Jones in a movie called Me, Myself, and Irene with Jim Carrey. While he has a split where he has a split personality, but I like her in movies where she played Judy Garland in the biopic where she won the Oscar. But this is not one of her best performances. But the other characters are fine, as they focus on Dodge and Carter more than Lexi herself. The blue team hires a high school football player named Gus who's terrible at the sport, and the team is broke, and they have no team now and have no choice but to get different jobs, as the acting is fine, but so far I'm not having a bad time watching this movie. Dodge hears about an upcoming football team needing to play, and he goes to C.C. Frazier, played by Jonathan Pryce, to chat with him while he sees Lexi having a chat with a man named Leonard and talks with her while reading an article on a magazine as she meets with Cece and Carter, and Dodge talks with them together at a dinner table and talks with them about going as a professional football player to give an idea of Dodge's team, the Bulldogs versus Carter. Well, we don't get that far, but Carter plays for them for now, and this plot is a little cliche in my opinion. Dodge, Carter, and Lexi get on a train while she interviews Carter, and Dodge happens to be in her room while Cece knocks on her door to speak his mind, and that's not very funny. And how many times have I seen that in a movie? Millions. Cece forced both teams to play, well, forced them to play Princeton University, and they practice the game and get new uniforms, and they get to their first game, and Lexi meets Suds, played by Stephen Root, who's an actor I know from Office Space, as Milton. And he's fine here, and the Bulldogs win their first game against the yellow team, which I think is, let's see here, Princeton University. And people love Carter in this movie and asks for his autograph, and that scene is mediocre at best, and the movie is finely made. The cinematography is good, as this feels like the mid 1920s, but I didn't mind it. But what I did mind is the rivalry story between Dodge and Carter, which was not original nor convincing. For example, Carter is recognized in the war as it was told by him, but I didn't believe it based on Krasinski's acting. Dodge takes a woman to a private bar and bumps into Lexi, who ends up sitting next to them and dance with one another while the other woman is in the restroom for quite a while until the cops come in, and Dodge and Lexi knock them out with the door and disguises themselves as cops and jump off a building together while being chased and make it out alive, while a kid almost jumps off in front of the mother, and he doesn't end up doing so based on what I'm understanding, which is problematic for sure, as this movie has problems for sure. Cece arrives at the hotel as he tries to give Lexi champagne and overhears her boss calling her room to give her a message as she's not in the room, which was also problematic. Dodge and Lexi hide in a store and kiss as they go back to the hotel. Carter is angry with Dodge and Lexi as he's drunk, despite he never was a drinker until Cece got him to do so, as that was Cece's plan, as he's a manipulator, and they fight outside as it will take all night as it was a draw, and Lexi leaves them to play the game on their own as Carter decides to play for Chicago, and Dodge says he'll beat them someday, and Carter says not likely. And this whole rivalry story is cliche, as I've seen this so many times in other movies. While Dodge and Carter reads the story, wrote about them, Lexi wrote about them, and Lexi gets sued because she said his war story was a lie, which I kind of knew it. And a colonel whom we met earlier in the movie, Mac, tells the public her story was a lie. And the press conference scene, when these other scenes are painful. Dodge talks with Lexi about by their rules, and he tells her to get the real story or else she'll be a housewife. And Carter calls her and tells her it is going to get worse for her. And I didn't care for that scene. Dodge gets in a bar fight with a man who picks on a boy and almost beats up his friend Eddie, but instead they get drunk together and asks Eddie for a favor for front row seats at the game against Chicago, which was painful, but it was humorous at the same time. I don't know if that makes sense, but Lexi and her boss Harvey have a meeting with Carter and Cece with the drunk Dodge entering the picture, and the lawyer named Pete about taking the story of their final football game and make the game bigger and better than ever, while the war veterans want to meet Carter, which is absolutely funny to me, while Carter confesses the story was a lie. And Lexi and Harvey leave the room as Pete talks with Carter and Cece and donate 50% of his earnings at the final game, and Cece gets fired from football, and they leave the room, and Dodge and Pete talks about a new set of rules, or else he'll retire, as he can't make Dodge, and he reluctantly agrees to it. And I did like that moment of the film in that scene. The final game begins with Lexi watching as everybody in Chicago, and they hate Dodge and the Bulldogs and love their own team as well as Carter and cheer for them. And they're seeing the same uniform with different kinds of color blue, to the point people will get confused as some point when in the game when they get all muddied up, while it's going the uniform like they get muddy in the uniforms and they're still not scoring at all, like any goal, for a couple of field goals. And we get to the fourth quarter and they play the game, and Dodge decides to fool the Chicago team, including Carter, in order to win the game as they're all muddied up. And Dodge pretends to be in the Chicago team by beating up one of their guys, and he goes to the medic, and Dodge scores the Bulldogs wins and the game without anybody realizing it, until they throw some water at Dodge and reveal that he scored the touchdown, and the crowd gets upset, and Dodge retires from the game and tells Carter it was fun playing with him, while Carter plans on confessing the war story the next day, and he rides off on a motorcycle with Lexi, and they talk about getting married and with kids, and this climax was, I guess, fun, but at the same time, a little cliched. Now it's time for my rating. I'll give this movie a 5.5 out of 10. How many times have I seen a sports movie pull this story off? Millions. As it's unfortunately not funny, but don't get me wrong, this movie is finally made, but it got cliched after a while. And the performances are fine, as this isn't as good as Goodnight and Good Luck nor Confessions of a Dangerous Mind from Mr. Clooney's directing resume. The cinematography is fine, as it felt like the mid-1920s. And I didn't mind that, but what I did mind was the rivalry story, as it is unfortunately not original nor convincing, as the acting is fine, but I didn't quite believe when Krasinski talks about how he was a war hero based on his acting in that scene. The movie has problems for sure, as it's a problematic script, but at the end of the day, this movie was just okay. It's a mild recommendation, as this might not be George Clooney's best work. We'll see worse later on, but I was fine after watching this movie twice, for this review anyways. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with the Ides of March. And until then, good night.